There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. We're all invited.
Greetings everyone, and welcome to the Dunwich Steps. Before getting started, I just want to give a big thank you to you guys for the recent support on my channel and my last video, which got a lot of views, and I've gotten quite a few new subscribers recently, so I just wanted to give a big thank you guys before we get into this. To preface this video, I first want to say that the content in this overview will be pretty heavily experience and opinion based. I've created this list based on what I've heard from other horror fans and from what I've learned in my own exploration of the genre. So I do want to say that I understand that many different people enjoy horror for many different reasons. These are just going to be the three main reasons that I've found that seem to be the most popular. Before we begin, I asked a few people why they enjoy horror, and I'll be putting their answers into different parts of the video, just to give you guys a better understanding of why other people enjoy horror. Right now, let's take a look at what James from the YouTube channel WannaPlay had to say about this subject.
Alright, so we have been asked by the Dunwich Depths to explain to the camera for a video for all you guys watching right now why are we into horror? Why are we into this weird genre of watching people die in weird ways and get their heads cut open and heads chopped off and all this crazy nonsense? What's appealing about that? Why do we like this so much, even though it's so weird and kind of gross? Well, for me, it's just something that I've always kind of been into. Like, ever since I was a kid, when I was much younger, I was too afraid to watch horror movies, but I was still really intrigued by them. So eventually, when I finally built up the courage to watch them, the first one I watched was Halloween, and it blew my mind. It was pretty much the 1-2 punch of Halloween, and then a couple weeks later I got to see Halloween 2018 in theaters, and it just blew my mind. It was some of the craziest stuff I'd ever seen, because it was scary, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. But it was just so intriguing in its simplicity. The fact that it's just this dude going after you. You don't know why. His face is coming out of the shadows. You don't know if you see him or if he's there or if he's not there. It wasn't as gory or as crazy as I thought it would be, so it got me hooked. It got me hooked on the genre, and then I started watching more and more, and it just became so interesting to me, because it's not just horror that I'm into. Like, I'm into, filmmaking, movies in general, but I think it also helps that horror is the most interesting to look at behind the scenes. Like, when you look at the behind the scenes of almost any movie, nothing compares to horror because of all of its effects and all its crazy stuff. Like The Thing. The behind the scenes in The Thing is way more interesting than the behind the scenes of almost any other mainstream release movie. So I just think it's so different, and it's so creative, and there's so much of it. Like, horror is endless. Like, there's a new horror movie coming out every week. So yeah, it's just something that I've always been intrigued by. It doesn't really scare me that much now. I'm pretty much just into it to see all of these effects and all these different storylines and all the stuff you could do with the genre and how creative it can get. So that's pretty much why I'm into it, because it's just so creative. Everything is different. Everything is unique. It's not like any other genre, and that pretty much every movie is its own creative, unique thing.
Thank you very much, James, for the excellent answer. I thought that was a great clip to start the video out with, but now let's get into the main points. Horror has been around for over 100 years. I get this number using The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920 as a starting point, seeing as it's widely regarded as the first true horror movie. However, there were a few before that, including a version of Frankenstein from 1910 and a film called The House of the Devil from 1898, so really the idea of a horror film is even older. Because horror has been around for so long, it's grown and evolved throughout many of the different stages of film history. We get a chance to travel through time when we look at older films such as Nosferatu, Phantom of the Opera, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. We get a unique perspective on the linear evolution of censorship in film, from not being able to see any blood to getting to see a toilet flush on film for the first time, to people being chained up and torn apart. With there being so many years of horror productions, we also get thousands of stories for these films. Some include horrible tragedies, while others include goofy mishaps or challenging hiccups. A person could research all of the wild stories and facts from these productions for hours and still have days or even weeks worth of interesting history to learn about. Now, I know there's an extensive history for film in general, but after talking to many other horror fans over a period of years, I've definitely come to the conclusion that history and legacy play a massive part in people's love for horror. Another thing the legacy of horror has given us is variety. With a time span of over 100 years, you're bound to see ideas repeated a few times. But there's still an insane amount of unique and wild films out there. A lot of people that I've talked to that don't watch horror movies think all horror is the same. Some guy or monster running around killing people. While this idea is understandable when looking at horror from an unexperienced point of view, any horror fan will know that there's a drastic amount of variety in the genre. There's a horror movie based on just about every fear out there. Scared of sharks? Watch Jaws. Scared of machines? Watch Maximum Overdrive. Scared of, I don't know, leprechauns? Watch Leprechaun. And that's just talking about the variety of main antagonists of horror films. There's also different actual film types: silent, black and white, 3D, found footage, and plenty of others. Now, one could argue that this is true for any genre, which is fair, but in my opinion, the difference and strengths of these different styles is expressed best through horror. But horror isn't just dependent on already existing fears. It can warp and evolve based on societal and economical situations. Take Godzilla, for example. Godzilla wasn't created because people were scared of giant mutant lizards. He was created because of their fear of nuclear weapons. This is why the longevity and variety of horror is almost infinite. Basically, any item, concept, or event can be turned into a horror story. Now, I'm not saying all the movies that would result from these events would be good or well made or worth watching, but they could definitely be made. When I asked my friend Hunter what he loves about horror, one of the things he said I think supports my view of variety pretty well. He said, quote, "Writers and directors aren't afraid to push boundaries unlike films from other genres. They're willing to go to dark places because they know someone can relate to them and find a positive from it." This thought helps give yet more context on why there's so much variety. Horror creators are often going one step beyond what people would expect in film, no matter how unconventional or disturbing it might be. Let me show you guys one more example from a horror fan that shows what I mean by variety. When I asked Ryan from the YouTube channel PrimeTime Horror why he loves horror, this is what he had to say.
So the main reason for me why I love the horror genre is because of how much there is to horror. There's more that meets the eye, and what I mean by that is, obviously horror movies are scary. They got that, but they have much more to them. They have action, intense scenes keeping you watching, tense scenes keeping you entertained. It has heartfelt moments, character build, throughout the movies. These characters go through traumatic events, and then by the end, the characters are closer bonded together. It's, most of the time, at least, it's not just, just a gory mess like most people think the horror genre is, just gory, mindless garbage. And, some horror movies are, I'm not gonna lie, but the majority of the genre isn't just that. It is so much more. It takes, in my opinion, some of the best aspects from other genres and makes it its own a lot of the time. And I feel like people who aren't necessarily horror fans kind of overlook that. So that is the main reason why I love the horror genre.
Before getting into the last point on this video, I figured I should probably bring up the most widely accepted reason on why people love horror movies, which is because a lot of us enjoy getting scared. Now, I'm sure this is true for many horror fans, but what I've found in my experience is that lots of horror fans are completely desensitized to horror movies. We've seen so much that it's hard to be surprised or spooked anymore. However, I did still want to acknowledge this reason because we gotta admit, anytime we get creeped out or spooked or scared by a horror movie, it's such a nice treat. Now, right off the bat, this sounds like the same thing as variety, but I mean it differently. When I brought up variety, I was referring to different film types, styles, and subgenres. When I say the horror genre is versatile, I mean there's so many things you can do with it. It's a great way to meet new people with similar interests, and I've made quite a few friends from the horror community myself. I mean, obviously you can watch horror movies, but you can also do other things like go to massive horror conventions, collect rare memorabilia, make your own horror films, and dive into the deep and complex history of horror as a whole. I found that there's more to do in the horror genre than any other, and I believe that's a massive reason so many people have made horror such a big part of their lives. There's almost always something new, whether it's soon to release in theaters or some obscure film from the 60s with a cult following. Alright, that'll do it for this video, but first I want to reiterate one last time, I understand these 3 points aren't applicable to every horror fan. I just wanted to make a video that might help people understand why others like horror so much. But there are dozens of reasons why someone may love the genre. So if there's another reason you personally love horror, please drop it in the comments so that I can see. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you all next time.